welcome to the Art of Being Human. You know, we're dealing with relationships and how to build up relationships, and I want to start off this morning by telling you that relationships develop slowly over a period of time, slowly and gradually. Now, it is true that some people feel that they fall in love at the first meeting, love at first sight, and relationships can become intense very quickly, so I can't count that out. It sometimes happens, but for the most part, and for most people, relationships develop slowly over a period of time. And we have to give it that time. Now, I know there are television shows, and I'm not mentioning any names, but you know what they are as well as me. There are television shows in which people date people, and then within a 13-week period, they have chosen somebody to be engaged to for the purpose of marriage. And most of the time, it just does not work out, because 13 weeks is not enough time. Most television shows run on a 13-week schedule. At the end of 13 weeks, they're out. And then, unless for some reason they're continued, but they're gone at the end of 13 weeks. So how do you get to relate to somebody enough that you want to marry them in 13 weeks? Supposing I wanted to get married, I've never been married and I've always been happy being single, but just for example's sake, supposing I want to get married, and I want to get married within 13 weeks. And do I think that it's a good idea to date about 35 people, 28 people, however many it is, to make that decision as to who I'm going to marry in 13 weeks? Not so. I mean, I've nearly been married twice and for some reason didn't get married. It didn't work out in either case. And nothing really bad happened. It's just the case that it just didn't work. And so therefore, I'm not really convinced that it would work if I decided, if I went on a program or I had a bunch of people that I wanted to date and I compared them and we did this kind of dating and that kind of dating, that in 13 weeks I'd know who I wanted to marry. And even the producers of that show says usually it doesn't work. Although one of the main moderators said sometimes it doesn't work, but sometimes it does. When you have the few that it works with, it's a very small fraction of the people who go on that show. Most of the time, it doesn't work out. People split, people get into arguments, people postpone their engagements. Many, many times, they just don't get married. Once in a while, it works, but once in a while, it would work anyway. So we know that relationships take time, and we have to give it the time that they need. Now, here are some things to remember about relationships. I'm going to kind of list them off here. The people who are closest to you are going to give you the most trouble in your relationships, the most upheaval. And these are going to be family members or people who are close relatives, and you have to learn how to deal with that. The second, successful relationships take work. You have to work at a marriage for it to work. And a lot of people aren't willing to put the time and the effort in. They think of divorce first, working out the marriage relationship second. It should be the other way around. There are some times, of course, when you need to walk away. But if you need to walk away, there need to be reasons for it, that everything that you tried, legitimately tried, didn't work out, because you just can't give up on a relationship that's important, such as a marriage. Successful relationships take time. People can change, but it's going to take a lot of work to make a person change, and the person who is trying to make the change is the one who's going to have the patience, because there are some people who won't change no matter what. They don't want to change, they like things as they are, and they refuse to change. People usually don't change because they're forced to do it. Outside of a court situation, I mean. In a court situation, that presents a little different scenario. But most people don't change unless they're led to change. And most of the time, they're led to change by following somebody, sometimes unconsciously, that they use as a role model, even though they may not even be realizing that they're using the person as a role model. Whatever it is. People do change, but it takes time and effort. You remember in the Bible, the Bible calls us the sheep of his pasture. Sheep are led. They're not driven. If a sheep herder wants a sheep to move, they get behind them and they actually get in front of them and they actually lead them. They don't get behind them and push them. It doesn't work their way. And you don't have to allow yourself to be a victim. Regardless of your circumstances, you don't have to allow yourself to be a victim. Now, who's a victim? A victim is somebody who has to take or feels they have to take whatever the perpetrator gives them, and they kind of have to latch on to that and stay with that and not make changes. If you're being abused, or if something's happening in your relationship that's very demeaning to you, you don't have to take that. You can always leave. There are times when leaving is the most important thing that you can do. I have helped people leave their spouses if they've been dangerous and if they've threatened to kill them and this kind of thing, and it's important to get them out of a situation because their caregivers or their spouses are threatening them. I have helped that to happen. I've also helped to reunite people who need to be reunited, because I'm sure that it can work with enough effort. Don't allow yourself to be a victim, and don't allow yourself to be controlled. You don't have to do that. Now, you can try to convince a person to change, but it usually doesn't work outside of a court situation. It usually just doesn't work. And we can decide to live with it, or we can walk away from it. Sometimes we have to walk away from it. Or if we decide to deal with it, sometimes we can become the role model that a person has to look at to see how they can change, because there are people sometimes that are willing to change, but they just don't know how to do it. And so what they are looking for, even though they're not consciously aware of it, what they're looking for is a role model to help them to change. How do I do this? How do I do that? This is the purpose of internships. This is the purpose of cadet teaching. This is the purpose of people in situations learning how to do things. They learn how to do things, and they do it by watching somebody else do it first, and then they go and they do it themselves. I can remember learning how to do grief counseling. I've done a lot of grief counseling, and I can remember how to do it. And the way that I knew how to do it was I watched counselors in action as they were handling people who were in the state of grief. I saw what they did, I saw what they said, and I learned from that. Now, of course, I had training as well, but anytime you watch your environment and you watch people in your environment, you're going to be drawn to some and not drawn to others. Those that you are drawn to are the ones that you're going to try to follow. You're going to try to be like them. They're like role models to you. And they teach you things even though they don't even know that they're teaching you things. So some people's personality, you have to remember also, is very resistant to change. Some people's personalities are. So the question psychology sometimes asks, and we have long discussions on, is that are our personality characteristics due to our inheriting them, or are they due to the environment? In other words, it's a question that we call it a nature or nurture questions. Is it nature because of your genetics that you behave and you act a certain way? Or is it the fact that you've learned it from your environment because you've seen others act in a certain way? Well, there's something to be said for both. I have actually an idea that most of our personality characteristics are inherited. And I say that with some kind of trepidation because I know how important the environment is in teaching us about relationships. But if you take babies when they're a certain age, when their personalities start to be manifest, they start to manifest their personalities. And that kind of manifestation shows you, are Are they going to be social people? Are they going to be quiet? Are they going to be angry? You know, they give hints as to what they're going to become. And it shows up in their infancy. It shows up when they're young. And another thing is research shows that if you have a set of identical twins or any twins, and for some reason they get separated from birth, and maybe one twin is raised by one family and another twin is raised by another family, if at some point they get together, they have much more in common with each other as twins than they do with the families that they grew up with. So that's definitely a genetic thing. So based on the fact that the personality characteristics show early, and based upon the fact that research definitely shows that people who are separated, who are born together, twins, quads, triplets, if they're separated and eventually they get together, they have much more in common with each other than the families that they grew up in. But at the same time, I can't forget the fact that society teaches us a lot. If we're in a good situation in society, we learn to like people, we learn to have friends. There are all kinds of things that we learn, but I think that our learning is demonstrated by the scope of what we have within us in genetics anyway. I think genetics trumps everything every time, but that's just my personal opinion, and I do respect those who don't agree with me, because I understand also where they're coming from, and I understand the truth of what they're saying. We learn from what we see. We learn from where we are. You know, they say that the baby is father to the man, the child is father to the man, or the child is mother to the woman. And what that actually means is whatever they experienced and in childhood actually reflects upon what their adult personalities will be like. And that's absolutely true as well. But I still think, and that's just my personal preference, of course, that it's within the confines of whatever our genetics are. Because some people, just, it's so obvious, they're social people, they like people, they reach out for people, and there are others that want to stay quiet and they don't want to be bothered, and they stay away from people, but not necessarily in a harmful or some kind of a poor way or mentally, or a way that denotes mental health problems. They're just quieter, they stay by themselves, they search out what their lives are going to be like, they do more work in libraries and quiet professions than they do where they're open to the public, and that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We can be quiet, we can be social, we can be all kinds of things, and that's all within the scope of being normal. If a person is not normal, if they do have mental health problems, then they're going to exhibit symptoms of mental health problems, and in some cases, right away. A baby who may have a problem is one who doesn't want to be held. They don't want to be cuddled. They don't want to be picked up. And that's very, very, very unusual. Most babies like to be cuddled. They like to be picked up. They like to be played with. They like the attention. They laugh and they have a good time with this attention, and that's perfectly normal. But if a baby decides very early on they don't want to look at you, they don't want to see you, they want to pull back, they want nothing to do with any attention at all, that's usually a sign of some kind of an issue that's going to raise itself up as a mental health problem later on. But most babies are not like that. Babies may be quiet, they may be not as social as other babies, but it doesn't make them mentally ill, only when they can't stand the thought of being picked up or touched or have any kind of social intimacy with a caregiver, a mother, father, or whoever's taking care of it, then you suspect that there might be a problem. But there might also be a hearing problem or a vision problem. Maybe they can't make contact because they can't see well enough, or they can't hear well enough. Babies don't see very well when they're first born anyway. Their eyes have got to get adjusted to the outside world. It takes them a while. And so, and some of them don't hear very well either, and that also can be within the scope of normal. So you have to know infant development. Now, what I've done in other past classes, and I may do it again in the future, I don't know, is to watch and see the development from birth until the person is, say, 12 years old, or from conception till about the person is 12 years old, and see what develops in those 12 years as a time period, and then you can discern how healthy the person will be. Some illnesses show up early. Some don't show up until adolescence. So I say from, say, birth to 12 years to see what the progression of a person will be. But people's personalities show early, and they show in infancy the general outline of their personalities. As a matter of fact, some people, some psychologists, and I think Freud also believed this, that the basic personality was laid down by age 5. What you got by age 5 was kind of a predictor of what was yet to come. And you can see by the time age 5 is concerned, your child has a personality. They are responding to you in a certain way, or they're quiet and not responding. And you can tell a lot within those first 5 years what will come. So you have to realize that relationships, as I said before, develop slowly over a period of time. And genetics and society are very important in a person's development, but I think that genetics may be a little bit more. You can't do any more than what your genetics allow you to do. You can do less because you may not have the opportunity to do as much as you can, but you can't do more than what your genetics allows you to do. And so for that reason, I'm saying that genetics is a little bit more important than the nurture, than the society. Although I know some people will think I'm wrong on that. I've gotten letters about that, but that's what I believe, and so that's what I'll say. So I think we can learn to treasure relationships with people that are not like us. Why should we decide that you have to be like somebody else in order to be friends with them? I have friends all over the world. I have friends all over the Middle East, and that's fine. I have friends everywhere, and I treasure these friendships. I don't get to see them very often, but when I do, it's like the relationship was never stopped. You know when you have a friend, because if you don't see them, say, for maybe a few months or maybe even a few years, when you do see them, it's like the relationship never stopped. It's like you were friends always and nothing hindered it. You know, it wasn't like there was a break in the relationship. When you get back together, you feel as if the relationship was always there and never stopped. So these are the friends that are worth having. And you know, you can have friends with anybody, any culture. You don't have to agree with everything they say. You don't have to agree with everything they do. What you have to remember is that you have to separate the behavior from a person from the person himself. You know, if I have a person that I like, but I don't like everything they do, that doesn't mean I don't like them. It means I don't like what they do. But if I can separate their behavior that they don't like with them, who I do like, I can continue on a friendship basis with them for as long as I want. And only if I become abused or demeaned or something like that would I ever break off the relationship. Now, what does it mean to be demeaned? If you are demeaning a person, or if you have been demeaned, you feel like you have less worth. It's not like you made a mistake. It's like you are a mistake. There's a big difference between those statements. If I make a mistake, I can be forgiven. I may be able to make up for whatever mistake I made. I may be able to make up for that. I may be able to give back what was lost. But to say that a person is a mistake, you are now making an accusation about their self-worth. They're not worth as much, you know. And people do feel that. If you demean a person, you are basically telling them that they don't have worth. Why don't you do something? I see teenagers do this, and I never understood it, but why don't you do something to yourself? Why don't you commit suicide? You're not worth anything anyway. Why would anybody do that to anybody else? I think we all have equal worth. We all have equal goodness. I mean, there's nothing about us that's perfect. We're always going to make mistakes. We're always going to be in trouble in the sense of not having perfection. But that doesn't mean that we don't have worth. It just means that we made a mistake. I've had so many teens come to me, and I've counseled a lot of teens. Well, I did this wrong, and I did that wrong, and I have to reassure them, you're still a human being. You know, you're a human being despite your mistakes. It doesn't matter that you made a mistake. You can come out of a mistake and be who you truly are. You can recover from a mistake. You can become better than a mistake, although I know that change can be slow, and sometimes people don't want to change, and we have to warn you, if you're trying to get somebody to change, it may be a long time before they decide to change, if at all. You have to be careful of that, and you have to lead by example. You can't force it, but at the same time, people do change when the situations are right, and they can grow when the situation is right. So you can respect them, and you can like them, and you can have them as friends, even if what they're doing isn't anything that you yourself would be doing. There are times when you have to walk away, but there's also lots of times when it's worth it to fight through a relationship. When I say fight, I don't mean literally fight. Work through a relationship. And when you work through the relationship, you can have a better relationship. People do grow and people do change, but usually not because they're forced to. They do because they are being led by example, by somebody that they admire, or they're learning something from society that they didn't know before. This is where the nurture comes in. But I still think it's within the confines of what is viable with their personality structure and their genetics. So I'm going to close it here, and we'll go on from here next time. Please join me then.